Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NFL Edition main slate talk for the Super Wildcard weekend this weekend. I already pushed out a two-gamer breakdown for the Saturday slate, so you can check that out on our channel if you would like. But this video is going to be about the full slate from Saturday to Monday. Obviously, that's like playing golf DFS. If you don't really want to wait several days, it might not be the slate for you. So you can just go and do the two games Saturday slate, or you can just focus on Sunday. Whatever the case, I'm covering all the games here and all my top plays for the Super Wildcard weekend, and you can apply them to whatever other slates you want. Unlikely that I will be doing another video because I'll be covering much of the other stuff here, and I already did cover two of the games for the first Saturday slate. All right, so if anything I do here helps you out, please like this video and also subscribe to the channel. If you're feeling extra giving, you can hit our super thanks, which is right below the video, and you can donate $2 or whatever you want to do just to give a little something back when Taylor and I do these videos for free. And by the way, you can hop in our Discord also for free. Come chat with us. Hang out 5:30 to 6 p.m. daily for NBA DFS going into lock, and also just come in and ask for advice, whatever the case may be. Whatever DFS sport you play, we are here to help. The goal is to help you win and establish your process. I will say, in addition to these videos and whatever you do, you should have some kind of lineup optimizer that you use so you can look at player projections, player ownership, and actually come to several lineups if you're entering a lot of contests, or whittle it down to one key lineup that you feel good about. My role here is to point out the plays I like, talk a little bit about strategy, and just add a little nuance to the situation that perhaps could be something that you have not considered yet, and hopefully provides value. Once again, if that is the case, like the video, subscribe to the channel, donate if you want, and then also join our Discord. All right, let's get into it. I go position by position. There are quite a few games here. We have 6 games to start off the 2025 NFL playoffs. It should be fun, and obviously all the teams here are pretty good to great. So it's just a different elevated situation. I do think we still want to pay attention to, matchups to a certain degree and everything, but it's the playoffs. If a big upset's going to happen, it's going to happen. And teams are just going to have a heightened sense of awareness. Defenses are going to play a little bit better, typically. So those are factors you have to consider. And then it's even, more unpredictable if teams are meeting for a third time when it comes to a divisional game like the Steelers and the Ravens. So yeah, just keep that all in mind. All right, so looking at quarterback, obviously up top, Josh Allen has the best fantasy point projection. The only issue is the Broncos do have a very capable defense. I don't at all think Denver is going to come in and shut down Josh Allen, but they have been a top 10 unit on the year against fantasy quarterbacks. They've certainly given up some big games. Remember the Jameis Winston game? So certainly Josh Allen can take advantage of them here. And if it's going to be a way for the Bills to win this game, they're obviously favored, so it's likely that they will figure it out. It's going to probably be through the air or via, Josh Allen. Because the Broncos have been pretty stingy against the run. So not that you can't play James Cook here, but if you like the Bills, you're cheering the Bills on. They do have a 27.5 implied total, and they are favored by, 8 points. Then you can certainly play Josh Allen, and you can consider other stacking options with him. He's only a little bit more expensive than Lamar Jackson, and he has the best projection of the slate. So no idea what ownership is going to be just yet on this full slate. It's tough to really gauge that because it's not looking at just Sunday. It's looking at 3 days of games. That said, wouldn't be that surprised if Josh Allen garners, reasonable ownership, 10% to 20%. I wouldn't be shocked, but he is expensive, and there are other guys we want to consider paying for, and the position is kind of stacked. So personally, I don't think I'm going to be playing Josh Allen just because he is expensive. It is the playoffs. The Broncos are a capable defense, and there's other options. So play him if you want to, but you can just drop down $200 less for Lamar Jackson. Similar projection. Also not a great matchup, though. I talked about Lamar in the Saturday slate. I think on the Saturday slate you have to play Lamar, but on a full 6-gamer, I don't feel obligated to play Lamar Jackson at all. Lamar and Josh Allen are both absolutely in play. But the two guys I am eyeing, if I'm going to spend big at quarterback, and I'm probably going to spend big about half the time, maybe 60%, just because I want a really nice floor and a considerable ceiling, especially when you have guys like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson on this slate. I think, dropping down to the likes of, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, all that, like those guys look good. There's no doubt about it. They are good plays and they save you money. But I just think one of these guys is going to go just absolutely nuclear, right? So I think paying up for somebody there makes a lot of sense. And if I'm going to pay up, though, it's going to be Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts. I do have a lean towards Daniels just because the Buccaneers have been a really soft matchup all year. Bottom 5 against fantasy quarterbacks on the season. They've specifically struggled against running quarterbacks, giving up 6 touchdowns on the ground. I believe that's second most on the year. I forgot to pull up my DraftKings window here so I can kind of look at game logs too while we're going here. So let me do that real quick. I know for a fact, Jaden Daniels has been awesome all year. He's averaged 25 fantasy points per game. Let me just see real quick. Where's my lineup? Yeah, so I have Jaden Daniels in my initial build here. 21 fantasy points per game. That's kind of impacted by the fact that he only played 12 attempts worth in the season finale and had 4 fantasy points. So that brings his average down quite a bit. He had been wrecking 35 and 36 fantasy points in his previous 2 games, 23 plus fantasy points in 5 in a row leading into the season finale. So all things told, comparing him to everybody else on this slate, he feels like a discounted option. He has massive upside, second best projection in the slate, really good matchup against the Buccaneers. You can play it either way. Either the Buccaneers are a defense we can attack through the air, which is true, or the Commanders struggle and they play from behind and Jay Daniels still probably gets there, right? So whatever narrative you want to spin, I think Jaden Daniels looks like an awesome play. Certainly excelled in this matchup earlier in the year. His rookie debut, he had 28 fantasy points against them. He's proven he can get there as a passer, 5 touchdowns against the Eagles 3 games ago. And he obviously can dominate on the ground, 127 rushing yards 2 weeks ago against the Falcons. So I think he's going to bust out here and be huge. He is my number 1 play at quarterback, just in general, and particularly if you're going to spend up. I don't want to ignore Jalen Hurts, so he's my second favorite play here. The Packers are not really that advantageous of a spot for quarterbacks, I will say that, but Jalen Hurts has had success against them quite a bit in his career. This year specifically, back in week 1, only 19 fantasy points in a pretty close game and a shootout. I think this game has a lot of upside, though, so I do think getting arguably pretty cheap exposure to a guy that has averaged almost 22 fantasy points per game on the year, that seems pretty interesting, especially since he only had 4 pass attempts in week 16 and didn't even play, in his last game. So I think obviously his numbers look a little bit better than that. Back in week 15, he had 29 fantasy points. The week before that, he had 24. A lot of really good games on the year. The big thing with Jalen Hurts, obviously, is going to be his rushing floor and ceiling. We just know he's going to run the ball quite a bit. He's got the tush-push thing. He's going to siphon production away from Saquon Barkley at times near the goal line. So 7.3K just feels cheap. So I think, not knowing what ownership is, I think he's an interesting pivot off of Jaden Daniels if my Jaden Daniels pick ends up being chalky. But I still think Jaden Daniels is a little bit safer. I think his matchup is definitely better than Josh Allen's, Lamar Jackson's, and probably Jalen Hurts, because the Packers are a defense that can be had, but honestly, on the year against quarterbacks, they rank 3rd. So it's not really that fun of a matchup, really, by the numbers. Their pass rush is pretty decent, and they've gotten better against the run too. So across the board, the Packers are not the super, super soft matchup that they once were. That said, Jalen Hurts is a little bit too cheap at 7.3K. Personally, though, my strategy in the quarterback pool is probably going to be pretty focused on Jaden Daniels. And then when I'm not playing Jaden Daniels, I'm probably going to come down to Sam Darnold. At 6.5K with a 21-point fantasy projection, he's probably the best dollar for dollar play at quarterback. The only thing is he does not offer the rushing upside that Daniels does. His matchup against the Rams is fine, but it's traveling across the country on the road against a pretty capable LA team. I think Darnold is a very, very good play. I just think he's more of a safer / cash game play as opposed to Daniels, who I think has way more upside. And there is just the possibility that what we saw in week 18 against the Lions is an unraveling of sorts for Darnold. Darnold went 18 for 41, 43% of his passes, 7 fantasy points. He was not on at all. They were not clicking in the red zone. And that could be a problem against the Rams, who actually have a really good red zone defense. So the Rams are a classic bend but don't break defense. It's on the road, traveling across the country. I have my reservations about Darnold for sure if he's going to be chalky. And at 6.5K with this projection, I would imagine he is. So I'm kind of painting a shaky picture for Darnold 100%. I'm just trying to play both sides of the coin here and play, be devil's advocate for you to signal Darnold is a good dollar for dollar play. 6.5K at this projection, he's good. Okay. In a regular setting, I would trust him and go with him for sure the majority of the time. I'm a little bit hesitant because he was very bad in week 18, and the Rams have been very good in the red zone defensively. So for me personally, Jayden Daniels is the top quarterback play. I do like Sam Darnold quite a bit. I will be underweight if he ends up being chalky, and at that price, I would expect him to be. Baker Mayfield in a possible shootout with the Commanders. I think he's okay. I think I would still go Sam Darnold. If I was going to go up to 6.8K, I would just drop down and eat the chalk with Sam Darnold, or I'd pay up and get Jayden Daniels. I think that the Vikings-Rams game could turn into a shootout. So if you want to punt the position, I do think Matthew Stafford probably stands out as the most compelling option. The Vikings have a very good run defense. The Vikings, let me double check here. The Vikings have been top 10 against fantasy running backs on the year, and against fantasy quarterbacks, also really good, honestly. But that's largely because they've intercepted 24 passes. So they give up production, though, still. The Vikings have been a pass funnel defense. They are bottom 5 in passing yards allowed, and they are bottom, let's see. Well, they've given up 24 passing touchdowns, which when you look at the rest of the league, it's kind of middle of the pack and even better than that. But still, 24 passing touchdowns is 24 passing touchdowns. Point being, the Vikings stopped the run pretty well. They didn't really do that well against Jahmyr Gibbs, but Jahmyr Gibbs is a beast. I would anticipate they do stop Kyren Williams because the Rams are not a very efficient ground game because Kyren Williams is not very good. So Kyren Williams is a very volume-dependent guy, and I don't envision him busting off big plays here. He grades out really well in the Roto Grinders lineup optimizer here, but I don't really love him. Anyway, so if I'm against Kyren Williams, I think it's going to be about Stafford in this passing game. Obviously, it's Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So Stafford looks like the best value here at 5.7K. No rushing upside whatsoever, but I think there is certainly a path to a 300 plus yard passing bonus. Back when he faced the Vikings, they already played in this matchup. He had 25 fantasy points, carved them up pretty well. So I don't know if we can certainly bank on that, but Stafford does have a ceiling, and the matchup is favorable for him. So I think he is a pretty good value too. I'm not super excited to play CJ Stroud or Russell Wilson. I mean, I think they're viable on the 2-game slate. They're punts. Like, you can certainly try anybody when it comes to DFS, but just not guys I'm very excited about. I think due to likely game script and the matchup, Stafford is the most appealing. Not super into Jordan Love either. He's not been very good lately. He has an elbow injury. He just lost Christian Watson. My Packers aren't looking great at the moment. It is a possible shootout with the Eagles, and in week 1, that was very much the case. So I don't think it's impossible that Jordan Love smashes that 5.8K price tag. He would be the next value that I would look at, but I don't have a ton of optimism just because the projection is the third worst of the slate. Bo Nix at 6.3, Justin Herbert at 6.K. They're just okay. They're pivots off of Sam Darnold. I prefer Sam Darnold. Nix and Herbert both offer a better rushing floor. Nix in particular, but Nix is on the road against the Bills. I feel like the Bills are just going to trounce the Broncos, and Justin Herbert is on the road against the Texans. I think Herbert should be fine here. He's probably my second favorite play on the Saturday slate, but on a big slate like this, I just feel like, he's just okay. I think I'd rather just go get Sam Darnold in that same price range. All things said, at quarterback, Jayden Daniels is my favorite play. You can play anybody you want, and you can roll with projections or roll with what the system pushes out. The main guy the system's going to push out is going to be Sam Darnold. I'm okay with Sam Darnold. I just prefer Daniels. All right, on we go to running back. Bucky Irving looks awesome. Awesome. Favorite running back play of the slate. Way too cheap. Obviously, it's the playoffs, and like I said, like things can just implode. Like Baker can get sacked like 6 times and throw 4 picks, and the Commanders just win like 44-10, and Bucky Irving is just relegated to nothing and just sucks, right? But he's 7K. That's pretty nice for a guy who's had 16 plus fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. Really nice 26-point fantasy outing against the Panthers 2 weeks ago. Back in week 1, he wasn't super involved, and yet he still had 9.6 fantasy points against the Commanders. The Commanders, they were known earlier in the year for being a really good matchup against or for quarterbacks and wide receivers, but it's been like the exact opposite lately. On the year, they've ranked 30th against fantasy running backs over the last 4 weeks. They are a bottom 15 unit against fantasy running backs. Let's see where they rank here. Bottom 10 in rushing yards allowed over the last 4 weeks. Ranks second most touchdowns allowed to running backs over the last 4 weeks. So the Commanders' run defense has not been very good. I think obviously the Buccaneers like to throw the ball a lot, but if the Buccaneers actually want to stay in this game, I think they need a very, very heavy dose of Bucky Irving. And at 7K and with his role and given the matchup, I am all for eating the chalk and just going full speed ahead with Bucky as a core play on this slate. So he looks great. Best projection at the position. Don't really need to say much more about him. Derrick Henry, 8.2K. Saquon Barkley, 8.5. The matchups are not as good as they appear to be. Barkley trounced the Packers in week 1, though. So if I had to pick between the two, I think I'm going to go Barkley here. 36 fantasy points against the Packers back in week 1. He's had 21 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games. The guy put up 2,000 yards rushing, 15 touchdowns. The only real worry here would be that, Jalen Hurts siphons some of his production, but so explosive, so dynamic. Green Bay is better defensively than people give them credit for, but I still don't think they're fully equipped to stop somebody as explosive as Saquon Barkley. So Saquon Barkley is my preferred stud up top. I like him more than Josh Jacobs. I like him more than Joe Mixon. I like him more than Kyren Williams. And I like him more than Derrick Henry. I think Henry is probably the second option there. I don't mind paying for either of them. I don't think I'll pay for both of them, though. And what I do there is probably just going to depend on ownership. Like if Saquon's massive chalk at 8.5K, I might get a little bit off of him and think like, okay, maybe we'll go for Derrick Henry, or maybe we'll save money and just stack like 2 7K range guys at RB. I'm starting with Bucky Irving. I'm locking Bucky Irving in. He just looks like an awesome play. But it's like Derrick Henry's matchup with the Steelers isn't that great either. A 2-game slate, yeah, fire him up. On a full 6-gamer, I don't think we have to play Derrick Henry. But right now, my strategy would probably be to lock in Irving and for the most part, look at Saquon just because I really, really like his upside. I'm hopeful that his price and the fact that he comes in with the 4th best projection, I'm hopeful that lowers his ownership. So we'll see what shakes out with that. You can certainly play Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs. They just feel a little bit expensive for not ideal spots. Like Jacobs has been a monster. There's no doubt about it. But the Eagles, they're like the 3rd worst matchup over the last 4 weeks against running backs. And on the year, they're the 2nd worst. So it's not really a very palatable matchup. They've only given up 5 rushing scores on the year. And Jacobs really, that's like his meat and potatoes, man. He needs to be scoring touchdowns to deliver. I think it honestly might be a Packers passing game week, if anything. And historically they kind of struggle when Christian Watson isn't out there. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in the Packers offense here. So I'm not super excited to pay 7.7K for Josh Jacobs. I don't think you're losing much by just paying 500 more for Derrick Henry or 800 more for Saquon Barkley. Like it's not like Jacobs is in such a better spot and such a sharp discount that, you should feel bad about that. So that would be my strategy there. I think if Jacobs is like unowned, he becomes more interesting. But I just think those guys look better. I do want to talk about Kyren Williams just because he's coming out with a really good projection and he's only 7.4K. So in theory, he looks great. No doubt about it. But guess what? The Vikings are not a good matchup. And now it's playoff time and the season's on the line. I don't know. I don't like it. The Vikings have been good against the run all year. Let's see where they rank. Yeah, they are what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th against the run in terms of rushing yards allowed. They have given up some rushing touchdowns, and obviously that is what Kyren Williams offers in terms of value. But this feels like a pass funnel spot. I mean, they are pass funnel defense. So like I said with Stafford, I think it's more of a Stafford, Puka, Cup kind of situation. And Kyren could absolutely fall into production, but he's not an efficient or explosive guy. He has to score touchdowns to deliver. So if he's going to be chalky at 7.4K, I will be underweight on Kyren Williams. I'm okay. So one thing I do when I do these breakdowns, I offer a lot of my own opinion and my strategy in here. I do want to say that sometimes, I am wrong sometimes, obviously. So Kyron projects well. He is a discounted price. But to me, it doesn't look good. Like, I don't like anything that I see there. I would rather pivot to Joe Mixon. I would rather pay $300 more for Josh Jacobs. I would certainly rather play Bucky Irving over him. And I would honestly rather just pay more and go get Henry or Barkley. As we go down, J.K. Dobbins, Aaron Jones, kind of the same guy here. I think given their roles within their systems, in their matchups, I think they're okay plays, but lack a ceiling. They don't have a really good projection for the slate. That said, they're cheap, so you can certainly consider them. I think I would prefer Aaron Jones here just because he's a little bit more dynamic, more involved in the receiving game. I think he probably possesses a better upside here. And also that Rams-Vikings game does have a 47.5 total, whereas the Chargers-Texans game has 42.5. So sometimes when you're making those close calls, we can factor in projections, we can factor in overall role, we can factor in game total and overall game environment, and we can factor in ownership. So right now we don't know ownership, but we know the projection is very close, the price is very close, and the game total favors Aaron Jones, and as does his role. So if you want to save money at RB2, pairing Aaron Jones with Bucky Irving is not the worst thing to do in the world. I mentioned earlier, I can go Bucky Irving, Saquon, or I can drop down and save a little bit of money there. And Aaron Jones is probably the next guy on my list as far as trying to save here. James Cook is certainly interesting because he feels discounted considering who he's been on the year. He's averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game. His projection is light, but that is because his matchup is not good. The Broncos rank 5th against fantasy running backs. They've only given up 7 touchdowns to running backs on the year. It's not a good spot, really. I think it's a Josh Allen game for the Bills, and that game in general. The Bills offense is super, super explosive. So they have a healthy total, but it's just, I don't know. I don't think it's really the spot for James Cook. Certainly a tournament play because he's only a 6.7K and probably not going to be very owned, but just not somebody I feel amazing about. Not super interested in Brian Robinson for the Commanders. The Buccaneers are top 5 against fantasy running backs. So, I'm just going Jade Daniels in the passing game there for sure. Don't mind Austin Eckler at 4.8K if you think the Commanders are going to trail, or if you just think Austin Eckler can get it going and be a factor in the passing game. It's an okay punt at 4.8K. The only other punt I really would play is Jaylen Warren at 5.2K. I prefer him over Najee Harris for sure. Just more dynamic, more involved as a receiver, more explosive. And Najee is super slow and has to score touchdowns to pay off. Moral story, definitely play Bucky Irving, and you have a lot of options elsewhere at running back, but you know where I stand. All right, so wide receiver, it's tough because you got to save money somewhere, and I think when I'm not playing Saquon, I'm going to go down to probably Aaron Jones at running back and try to get in at least one of these studs for sure, probably hopefully 2. Puka Nacua does look like the best one. How you save money is up to you. Puka Nacua, like if you're paying up a wide receiver, he's the best option because he's got the best projection. He's got the pass funnel matchup with the Vikings, who have not been good against fantasy wide receivers. He's the cheapest of the top 4 projecting wide receivers, and he has a massive role with the Rams. So everything looks good for Puka. He is a smash play for me. Feels weird to call him a core play at 7.6K, but I think he is. I think starting out builds, like I don't have a lot of definite core plays for this slate because there's just so many ways you can go, but Puka and Bucky Irving are borderline locks for me. I feel like they look so good. I mean, they're cheap relative to who they are and relative to the slate, and they have the best projections at their positions, and they have good matchups. Like it all looks good. If they fail, I mean, fuck, whatever. Like who cares? Like it is what it is. That's football. It's variance. It's a high variance sport. But Puka looks awesome. Prefer him to Justin Jefferson and every other top wide receiver spend. That said, he's going to be chalky probably for all those reasons. That's chalk I'm willing to eat. But if you want to get different, obviously Justin Jefferson is only $500 more. That game's going to be a shootout on Monday Night Football to cap off Super Wildcard Weekend. So Justin Jefferson looks totally fine. He has not been great lately, I don't think. I didn't look at his final numbers. Did not show up. Well, I'm wrong about that. I mean, the last 2 games, he's been fairly pedestrian by his standards, 8 and 17 fantasy points, but he did have 39 fantasy points against Seattle, 35 against Atlanta. So I think these have been a couple down weeks. I would not be shocked if he bounces back in a big way here. It's just going to all come down to, do I have the funds to go get both of these guys? I think that's a really fun way to cap the slate with Puka versus Justin Jefferson as like hammer plays in the last game of the week. Not a total necessity, but that is something I will look to do if possible. Mike Evans is totally fine against the Commanders. A little bit expensive, obviously major touchdown threat and the best option for the Buccaneers. But again, I think Bucky Irving and the Buccaneers ground game is the way I want to attack Washington. Nico Collins is the top option for the Texans. Chargers have not been as good against passing games lately, so I think he's fine. It certainly has a high ceiling. The only issue there is, no Stephon Diggs, no Tank Dell. It's kind of a back and forth thing. On one hand, he's like their only good passing game weapon, so you would think he would just get like 12 to 15 targets in a do or die game. But on the other hand, he's then easier to defend. So I think it's not crazy to go get Puka and somebody else who has a similar or better projection and just be like, if Nico is why I don't win by fading Nico, then so be it. AJ Brown's pretty interesting because he does have a good projection. I don't think the Packers are going to have Jair Alexander, and he's only 7.5K. So AJ Brown is a bit of a dark horse, a direct pivot off of Puka, and or a good pairing option with Puka because he has the same ceiling of Jefferson, but he's $600 cheaper. So I think if you can get there, I think Puka and Jefferson to close out the slate, assuming they're not both super chalky. I think that's really a fun way to do it. But also Puka and AJ Brown is probably my second favorite pairing among the top wide receivers, just because I think AJ Brown's going to crush here. Scary Terry looks really good at 6.5K. Nice pairing option with my boy Jaden Daniels. If you can get there and it makes sense, that's cool. I have no problem with that. He is definitely one of the best mid-range plays at wide receiver. He's been really good all year, honestly. He's had a career year. I would imagine that gets going, and he has a lot of success in a soft matchup against a pass funnel Buccaneers defense. Ladd McConkey looks good. I think I prefer Terry McLaurin here. Cortland Sutton is fine because Denver's probably going to throw, and he's the number one option. Again, prefer Terry. Jordan Addison would be a nice leverage play on Justin Jefferson at 6.1K. I think he's a fine play. Certainly has slate breaking ability, and he's pretty cheap. I prefer Jefferson. I think they're really going to go after Jefferson hard after him not having a good game against the Lions, and obviously they need to win. So I think he'll be the guy they go to more, but at a 2K savings and a potentially massive ownership leverage spot, Addison's very, very interesting. Khalil Shakir is too cheap. 5.3K. Khalil Shakir, he's their most dynamic wide receiver right now for Buffalo. He's not a core play though for me because Buffalo, you never know what they're going to do. They have Shakir, they have Cam Coleman, they have their tight ends, they have James Cook, and they have Amari Cooper. So you just never know who's going to pop off. I would just play the ownership with the Bills. If Shakir's going to come in as massive chalk, I would go look at Amari Cooper is probably like way cheaper. Yeah, Amari Cooper 4.9, Cam Coleman 4.6. That's what I would do. Not to say Shakir's a bad play. Not at all. He projects the best of all the Bills receivers, but if he's going to carry more ownership, I would rather in tournaments just pivot to one of the other guys. I do like George Pickens at 6.3K. Feels more like a play for the 2-game slate. Good price for him. He's been bad, but the Ravens are a pass funnel defense, and the Steelers are probably going to be playing from behind, so he is a good play, and the price is nice at 6.3K. Devontae Smith, 5.7K, explosive guy. The Packers cannot stop both him and AJ Brown, so you can just pick your spot there. Nice price for sure. So if you want to leverage potential AJ Brown ownership, or you just want to get exposure to that passing game or that game in general, and don't want to pay an arm and a leg, 5.7K for Devontae looks really, really good. I like him quite a bit. Quentin Johnston is a really nice value for the 2-game slate on Saturday, but also a pretty good value overall, just because he had crazy work last week in the finale. They got his confidence up. 13 catches on 14 targets. Are you kidding me? Don't anticipate that happening again, but he's definitely a really nice leverage play on potentially chalky Ladd McConkey. And honestly, just a cheap guy with a decent projection. I think if he's remotely involved, he is a little bit too cheap. Cooper Kupp is very risky. He has been not involved whatsoever. Look at this dude. All this red. That is disgusting. We know what he can do, though. 20 fantasy points 3 games ago or 4 games ago. 20 for 31, 15, 24. Like, I don't think he just dropped off a cliff. I think they just made the decision to just go to Puka more and run the ball a lot. So It hasn't been good, but he's obviously leveraged on Puka ownership. And also, you got to think playoff time, teams are going to do whatever they can to take away the best players. So if the Vikings successfully take Puka out of this game, Cup could be a super, super overlooked beast at 6.4K. So absolutely, I will have some tourney entries with Stafford with both these guys and Stafford with Cup only, and then also just Cup by himself a little bit too. I think Puka is way safer, way better ceiling, but Cup is a very, very intriguing GPP play. Keep an eye on the status of Zay Flowers. Actually, let me double check him. Is he already out? Long shot to play. So I'm assuming he is out. That makes Rashad Bateman a really good value at 5K. We can certainly entertain the other values for the Ravens then too at wide receiver. They don't look too enticing, but all these guys are going to get a bump. Tylan Wallace, Nelson Aguilar, those guys are just going to be maybe even Devontae Walker. Just, make sure whoever you play is actually active. And then they could also use their tight ends more. So I'll get to that in a little bit. That's probably what they'll do. But you can certainly take a shot on Aguilar at 3.4K and Tylan Wallace at 3.1K in tournaments. Not safe plays whatsoever. I would certainly rather trust in Rashad Bateman if I'm getting a Ravens wide receiver, but more on that in a bit. A lot of value, honestly, at wide receiver. So like I said, I don't feel like I have to spend and go way up everywhere because there's a lot to like here. Jaden Reed at 5.5K. Packers have been very erratic with his usage, but I got to think he's going to be involved with Romeo Doubs dealing with a sickness, with Christian Watson out for the season, and this possibly being a shootout where Green Bay is playing from behind. So Jaden Reed at 5.5K feels like a smash. Not going to call him a core play just because the Packers haven't looked great. He hasn't been super involved, and like Jordan Love's arm thing, like a lot of variables here that I don't love and trust. But 5.5K for the ceiling and role he should have here it's too cheap. It's too appealing. If I don't highlight a guy, it doesn't mean I don't like them necessarily. It just means that they don't really stand out to me fully. Jalen McMillan is a little bit interesting. Mike Evans leverage for sure. 5.2K. He crushed last week. Good matchup, decent price for the role he has now. Not really a priority for me. I'd rather get to Jaden Reed here, I think, and Rashad Bateman probably stands out a little bit. But if that's what I'm thinking, it's possible the field does too. So he could be a GPP play. Let's see. Dobbs at 5.4K and Dontavian Wicks at 4.5K. By default, with no Christian Watson, they're going to be more involved. I think I trust Dobbs as long as he's in and not limited in any way because he has been sick. Dobbs is really good playmaker, really good playmaker. He's a guy Jordan Love trusts a lot. Direct pivot off of Jaden Reed, so you can play the ownership game with those two guys, but I like Romeo as long as he's in. Whether or not he's in, Dontavian Wicks is really interesting as a salary saver at 4.5K. Obviously, if Romeo's out, Wicks is a smash and would be a core play at 4.5K, but I still like him even if Romeo's in. So just because the Packers spread the ball around, you never know who's going to hit. We could go further down for punts. I already talked about the Ravens guys. You also have Deontay Johnson for the Texans, 3.5K. He had 2 catches on 4 targets last week with them. They don't have Tank Dell anymore, so entirely possible he gets pretty involved out of the slot. Not the worst try. Kelvin Austin, the third, could be George Pickens leverage, and he's just going to be out there, playing a decent amount. So at 4K, he's okay. I don't think he's a must on either the 2-game slate or this slate, but he is viable. Josh Palmer, if he's in at 4.3K, he's okay. I think I prefer Quentin Johnson because he has more of a ceiling. And everybody else down here is just a dart throw. All right, over at tight end, I'll just talk about them because I was mentioning before, with the Ravens likely not having Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews gets a bump, but I really like Isaiah Likely. I think they're going to end up using more 2 tight end sets. So at 3.2K, he looks like a really, really good value. I mentioned him on the 2-game slate. I think he's an interesting pivot away from Andrews there. And just he's a really good punt at tight end on a slate where tight end doesn't feel that good. I mean, we're looking at Zach Ertz as our top projecting option here. That feels gross. I mean, Ertz has honestly been good on the year, no doubt about it. Excuse me. Averaging 10 fantasy points per game. But he even had 25-point fantasy game 2 weeks ago. So he's fine. I don't know. I just think that's not really where I want to invest my funds. I mean, Buccaneers are bottom 10 against tight ends, so I will say that too. But if he's going to be the top projecting guy at 4.3, people are going to go get him. I don't mind going and doing something different. On the 2-game slate, I said Pat Freiermuth was probably my favorite tight end, and I think I'll stand by that just because he's basically their number 2 wide receiver right now. And the Ravens are a pass funnel defense. And they're not like amazing against tight ends. So I still think he looks good. He was awesome in week 18. TJ Hawkinson is totally fine. The Rams are second worst against tight ends on the year. So you certainly could leverage Justin Jefferson ownership with TJ Hawkinson. And 4.2K is a really good price for what he can do. He's very inconsistent. So he's definitely a tourney play, not a cash play or he's not a core play for me just because he's very, very inconsistent. Like 2.9 fantasy points in like the game they had to have last week, 4.7 against Seattle 3 games ago. He hasn't topped what? He hasn't had a 15 plus fantasy point game since week 12. Like there's just not a massive ceiling there because it's the Justin Jefferson show. And there's also Addison and Aaron Jones. So I think he's a good play at the price and with the matchup, just not like a super, super safe play. Tucker Kraft is pretty interesting at 3.7K just because no Christian Watson. He's just going to get a few more looks. Obviously, if Romeo Doubs is out, even more so. So I think at 3.7K, he's an interesting punt. Dallas Goedert at 3.9K. Matchup against Green Bay is just, middle of the road. It's fine. Nothing bad there. He's just a good price. So if you want to leverage AJ Brown ownership, he's just too cheap. It's just too cheap at 3.9K. But honestly, I think Isaiah Likely stands out as the best value play at tight end. And then if I want to play a safer play that maybe won't get crazy ownership on this slate, I think Freiermuth ends up standing out the most. All right, let's wrap it up with defenses. I said on a 2-game slate, if I can afford it, the Ravens look really good. But on a bigger slate like this, I think we can roll the dice a little bit more so we can save up and go elsewhere. I'm not playing the Broncos against the Bills, but you never know. Broncos do have a capable defense. Could always get that production via defensive touchdown or special team score. Certainly have a capable pass rush as well. So, I mean, if you want to just punt, you can play them or the Steelers. They're just in the 2 worst spots on the slate. So don't really want to do that. I think the first one that really stands out for me is going to be the Commanders, just because I do think, Baker Mayfield does tend to melt down in big situations. The Commanders do have a good pass rush. So I can definitely see a situation where Baker is getting lit up with sacks and throwing some picks or something too. So that's certainly possible. It feels weird because I love Bucky Irving on the other side, but I think the Commanders are an interesting play at 2.8K. Like I said, the Packers defense is underrated. I do not hate them at 2.6K. Obviously, I would not fire them up when I'm playing a bunch of Eagles, but it's not crazy to think that they step up and deliver a solid outing here against a team they did face back in week 1. Not my favorite play, but they are not out of play. The Texans at 2.7 look pretty good too. I think if I can get around 3K or lower, I'd feel pretty good about saving some cash and actually getting a defense that I feel good about. Houston is certainly one. I think at home against the Chargers, a Chargers team that has imploded so many times in the past. Maybe it's different with Harbaugh there, but you never know. So 2.7K, I don't mind it. D'Amico Ryans has a pretty good unit there, and they seem to be getting better and better. And then Philly, Chargers, Vikings, they're all fine. I just don't really want to pay up if I don't have to, at defense. All right, that is going to do it for me and my breakdown. Hopefully you can see the plays I like the most. If I had to just pick core plays right off the bat, I'm definitely looking at Bucky Irving. I'm definitely looking at Puka Nacua. And then, I think saving at tight end defense is the best way to go. I don't mind the other plays, but I do need to save money somewhere if I want to go pay up and get a couple of these stud wide receivers and or a stud running back like Saquon and or pay up for a stud quarterback like Jaden. So you got to take some chances on this slate and save some cash. Luckily, the spot to do it is tight end. And then also there's a lot of value that we can try in tournaments at wide receiver. All right, that does it for me. Hopefully this helps you out. If it does, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, join our Discord, and if you're feeling extra saucy, you can hit that super thanks right below the video and throw a couple shekels our way to help us for giving out some free content. Thanks for watching and good luck.